Matthew chapter 7. We'll be looking at verses 1 through 5 in a few moments here. I want to talk to you about something that I need deliverance from. I bet I'm not alone, but I'm going to talk to you about this. And it begins a series on relationships. So, get ready to get your toes stepped on. Mine have already been crumpled up. All kinds of knotted. I got a bunion on the side because of this. I'm telling you, I'm all messed up. I want to talk to you today about something, like I said, I need deliverance from, and that is the subject of criticism. I'm not talking about correction, not even talking about constructive criticism, which is a positive or tactful evaluation. Those are important things. We need those things in our lives. You know what? We need to be constructively criticized on occasion. It keeps us humble, doesn't it? We need someone to correct us when we're doing something wrong. I don't want to go through life continuing to do something wrong, and then someone later on says, you've been doing that wrong all along. That's embarrassing. I mean, have you ever come up to someone and been talking to them and you've been calling them a name that like, hey, Bob, good to see you. You've been talking to them all the time through the whole conversation. Hey, Andy, have you met my friend Bob? He's a great guy. You got to hear about Bob. He's been doing this thing. Hey, Dan, come here and talk to Bob. He's a pretty cool guy. And then you get finished with all that, and they're like, his name is George. I've been in that situation. Am I alone? I'm the only one who's ever called somebody the wrong name for an entire conversation and then came back to find out later. Because they never corrected me on it. They just let me keep on calling him Bob. And I'm telling you, that's embarrassing. But I'm not talking about correction or constructive criticism, which is important. But what we're going to talk about today is the kind of thing that demoralizes someone. That demoralizes employees. That means makes their morale go down, okay? Morale is it's that motivating thing, right? Rachel, am I close on that? What's your morale? It's something that it keeps you going, doesn't it? Gives you a boost. It helps keeps you up here when everything else seems like it's down here. But criticism demoralizes employees, it demoralizes family members, it demoralizes friends, and it still does not correct the situation that's being condemned in the first place. Come to discover. Dale Carnegie wrote about it. He said it's one of those things that wounds a person's precious pride, their sense of importance, and it arouses resentment. Are you listening to me? Or are you going to shut me down because, we're talking about something that we're all guilty of, aren't we? Do this for me so I know you're there. We're all guilty of it. Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through 5, Jesus talks about criticism in a way. He calls it judgment. So, in Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through 5, would you stand with me in honor of God's word? See, people are real good with this passage, because we use it out of context many times, and we use it to throw things back in the face of someone when they've upset us. Oh yeah, judge not, lest you be judged. You're gonna pay for this, mister, when you talk about me like this. That's not what Jesus meant, really. I'll tell you what he meant in just a moment, but this is what: judge not that you be not judged, for with what judgment you judge, you will be judged. That's a lot of judgy words there, isn't it? And with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look, a plank is in your own eye? You're a hypocrite, is what he says. He says it with an exclamation point in my Bible. Hypocrite! First remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. May the Lord bless the reading of his word. Amen? Amen. Here's the thing. I don't choose to be critical. I don't choose to be critical. But I have also found that it is hard for me to stop once I get started. Do you know what I'm saying? You pick one thing out that ticks you off about something, and it just snowballs into several, right? My kids are the brunt of that for me all the time. I start griping at them about one thing, and it becomes a long laundry list, doesn't it, Milas? And you're like, does he ever stop? And the answer is no, I don't. It's a constant thing. If you start criticizing and if you start being critical about something, sometimes it's hard to stop. Here are my hindrances that I figure to an improvement in this area. This is what holds me back from getting better at this. First of all, personal trust and feelings of betrayal. To include a perception of mutual and position-appropriate respect. Does that make any sense? You know what I mean by position-appropriate respect, Nate? Like your respect towards your boss, right? That's position-appropriate. Like your respect for your parents. That's position-appropriate. You cannot talk to your boss in the same way that you talk to your coworker. You should not talk to your boss in the same way that you talk to your coworker. You cannot talk to your parent the same way that you talk to your brother or sister. It shouldn't happen that way. That's not the way this relationship thing is designed. You cannot talk to your spouse like you are talking to your children. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so it's position appropriate respect. So that's what's a hindrance for me sometimes, is that this personal trust and this feeling of betrayal in one aspect of it, and then the other aspect is that there's this mutual respect is missing, if you will. So the second thing is a fear of failure, a fear of personal ridicule, a fear of loss. Okay? That's one reason I get so critical. If I'm not so critical about this particular thing, whatever it is, I might lose it, or I might not be able to use it, or it might go bad. That kind of thing. I chalk that up, Mom and I have talked about this. I chalk that up to, I have a lot of toys from when I was a kid still. And do you know why I have a lot of toys from when I was a kid? Because I did not trash my toys. I kept them, where they were almost not played for in many aspects. Right, Mom? I got a lot of things. And the reason why is because my mom was a single parent. And when we got something, it was special. And I may not get that again. And so if I really liked something, I was going to take care of it. And I was going to play with it well. And so I have this fear of loss. Like, if it doesn't get taken care of right, or if you're not doing it right, I may be critical about it because I don't want to lose that particular thing. The problem is, it becomes a point of contention in my relationships. And so that's the second hindrance for me. Now I'm just talking about me. This is confession time from Pastor Matt. If this doesn't apply to you, just, scribble in your notes or something like that. The third thing. The third hindrance for me of why I have trouble letting go of criticism or being delivered from it is that I forget how I used to be. Do you know what I'm talking about there? It's easy to be critical of something now. It's easy to be critical of my children. It's easy to be critical of someone at work who works for me or with me, when I forget about how I used to be. I forget about when I first started. I forget about when I was a teenager. I forget about these things. Now, let me just caveat here. Youth, my kids included, do not start making a list of things you can throw back in my face the next time I'm getting on to you about something. I'll go back to the first part. Correction is okay. All right? But that's it, though. I'll admit, I have to drive my kids crazy when I forget how I used to be. And I use this excuse, parents, you ready? Kids, I'm giving you all kinds of help here. I use this excuse. Well, I don't want you to make the same mistakes that I made. Ooh, doesn't that make you mad, Milas? Truth is, I don't, though. That's a true statement, isn't it, parents? It's an absolutely true statement. It's very, very hard for me. The fourth thing for me, this is my hindrances again, is fatigue and loss of patience. I'll admit it. I get tired and I just don't want to mess with it anymore. It's going to be my way or the highway at that point. Because this is the way it's got to be. I don't have time to debate about it. I don't have the patience to debate about it. It's got to be this way or we're done with it. And the fifth thing I'll tell you, across the whole broad spectrum, is this. I'm going to get a lot of amens on this. I better get a lot of amens on this. The fifth hindrance, broad spectrum, social media. Oh, goodness. Oh, Lord, help us. Help us. In a social media world, it is too easy to say what you want to say without any accountability whatsoever. And one doesn't have to see the results of whatever's said. You know what I mean? You don't have to see the repercussions of your bad mouth on Facebook. Church, I'm going to tell you right now, stop it. Because there is any given time you can look on Facebook and there's someone in here, myself included, that might pop off on Facebook. We need to be accountable to one another. If you see one of your church family members pop off or spout off on Facebook something that's inappropriate or shouldn't be on there, you need to call them out. You do. You need to call them out appropriately, though. Let me tell you, don't blast them on Facebook back. That's two wrongs don't make a right in this situation. How about a private message or something? Better off, call them. Better off, talk to them face to face. But social media is a big hindrance on me when it comes to criticism. And you know why? It's because we lose sympathy. We lose empathy when we can pop off at any given moment on Facebook, Instagram, MyFace, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter. When you pop off on any of that stuff. But I'm telling you something, this is nothing new. Let me give you an example. I read about our 16th president. Who was that? Abraham Lincoln. I was testing you boys. Did you know that, Cedric? Christopher Columbus. That's okay. Youth ministry, everyone. Anyway, Abe Lincoln. And this is what I read. I want to read it to you. As a young man in Pigeon Creek Valley of Indiana, I have no idea where that is, but any Indianans know where that is? It's south. All right, so as a young man in the Pigeon Creek Valley of Indiana, he not only criticized, but he wrote letters and poems. Get this. He wrote letters and poems ridiculing people, and then he dropped these letters on the country roads where they were sure to be found. One of these letters, it caused so much problem for him, and it burned for him for a lifetime. Even after Lincoln had become a practicing lawyer in Springfield, Illinois, he attacked his opponents openly. He would send letters to the paper, and he would make fun of people. And so here he is, he's ridiculing people. In 1842, the story goes that in autumn of 1842, he ridiculed this vain, pugnacious politician by the name of James Shields. And I don't know who James Shields is, but Lincoln did know, because Lincoln, he made fun of him through an anonymous letter that was published in the Journal. And Shields, he was sensitive, he was proud, and he boiled over with contempt when he found out about this note that was sent in to the paper. And he found out who wrote the letter. He got on his horse, he rode over to Lincoln, and he started an argument with him. He didn't really start it, but he found Lincoln, and he challenged him to a duel. Is this something you know about in history, Dan? This is a true story then, is it? He found Shields found him, challenged him to a duel. I'm going to cut the story short. Lincoln didn't want to fight, you know? Typical. He'd be like me, you know? I'm like, I know I said those things, but I really don't want to duke it out with you, mister. I don't want, especially a duel, because everybody knows how those things end, right? And bad news. Lincoln, he didn't want to fight, so he was able to choose the weapon. Do you know what he chose? Broadswords. He's like, let's see, we could do guns, we could do slingshots. I would have chose marbles or something like that, but he chose broadswords. They were getting up and they were getting ready to duel. I don't know if it was 10 paces kind of thing and running each other with a sword. I don't know how that works, because I never dueled in my life and I don't have that on my bucket list or anything like that. But Lincoln and Shields were stopped from the fight by their assistants, by their seconds, whoever they were. And just before the duel, he stopped that. The story goes that was the most lurid and personal incident in Lincoln's life. It taught him an invaluable lesson in the art of dealing with people. From that time on, the story goes, he never criticized anybody for anything. There are stories about him talking with his generals or writing letters to his generals, and he would build them up before he knocked them down and corrected them. He changed his way of doing things. What I'm going to present to you this morning is simply this. It's not about what you say necessarily. It has everything to do with the way that you choose to say it that is causing problems in your relationships. Oswald Chambers, an inspirational writer. How many have heard of Oswald Chambers before? Okay, some of us have. And he says this, first of all, and we already know this from what we read in Matthew chapter 7, is that Christ advises not to criticize. He advises us not to judge. But he wrote this. He says, the effect of criticism is the dividing up of the strengths of the one being criticized. You're tearing them down. It serves to make you harsh. It serves to make you vindictive. It serves to make you cruel. And it leaves you with the soothing and flattering idea that you somehow are more superior than the person whom you're criticizing. Am I stepping on toes yet? No, not bothering anybody. Very nice. Okay. Lately, we've attempted to bring more attention to your spiritual gifts. And this is in order that you might begin to build one another up. Because in this world that tears us down, we need support. We need encouragement. We need love from one another. It's a dangerous world we live in, isn't it? So we've talked about these spiritual gifts. And the idea is that we as a whole will grow spiritually, we'll grow emotionally, but even so, we'll grow numerically in the process. I'm beginning to conclude that regardless of whatever services we offer, no matter how cool the ministries that we have, no matter what we do in the community, none of that matters if we are not truly friendly and interacting with one another well. And if we are not effective as a congregation together. It doesn't matter what we do outside these walls. If we're bickering and fighting and not getting along inside the walls. Somebody say amen. The greatest downfall as individuals, the greatest downfall as family members, the greatest downfall as a church is when we focus on each other's faults and are critical of one another instead of addressing the needs that are accomplished in the midst of this congregation, in the midst of our family, in the midst of our emotional situations. If we're not addressing the needs, then all we are going to do is focus on the faults. And I am guilty on all levels of my relationships. And if I'm guilty, I would venture to guess that you are as well. Am I cutting close? Is it possible to shine a light, a positive light on this subject this morning? Can we repair the damage that has been done? Maybe we can all walk away today and with something that can change us and that can maybe even improve us. I think it's possible. In the Billy Graham Training Center Bible, which is what I hold right here, it talks about something. It talks about Christians can be tempted to judge each other, even when the one judging is deep in sin. So here's the problem. The problem is that we gripe about somebody else or gripe to someone else or cut someone down, and we don't even think about what we're dealing with, that we are short on. I'll get a little closer on that in just a minute. I'm not done making us feel guilty, I guess, huh? In this, Jesus warned against this form of hypocrisy in this verse. It is hypocritical to see faults in others and not see them in yourself. That goes in both ways in a relationship. Your attitude toward others who are at fault should be dictated by Christian love, not self-righteous judgment. Remembering God's grace, God's patience, and His forgiveness toward you can help you develop a humble attitude toward others. And remember what Romans 3 says, that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So don't be mistaken here, though. Hear what I'm saying. There are positive aspects to criticism. It keeps us humble. It keeps me humble when someone criticizes me. And it indicates there is a need for correction, no matter how you look at it. You might be criticized about something, and you might think, this is so unjust. I am so picked on. Why do I have to be the center of this? But the truth is, if someone's criticizing, you have to examine that situation. Any normal person would examine that situation in your life. And what they're criticizing, at least ask, is there something that needs to be worked on here? Is that a fair assessment? Is that a fair statement? I would contend that Jesus teaches here in Matthew 7 that it is the method utilized and the heart of the one criticizing which causes the problem many times when we're talking about criticism. Don't forget that Jesus teaches here that one who condemns or judges others will themselves be judged. That's what he says here, right? And he also seems to correct those who give a hasty and unfair judgment and criticize others without first considering their own faults. That's the big thing. We're quick to conclusions. I'm quick to jump to conclusions when it comes to a criticizing event. Although, would this be necessary at all if two persons would just spend time trying to understand the situation, trying to understand one another? Again, Dale Carnegie, he wrote, instead of condemning people, let's try to understand them. Let's try to figure out why they do what they do. That's a lot more profitable, a lot more intriguing than criticism. It breeds sympathy, it breeds tolerance, it breeds kindness. Now, if you and I want to learn, and you and I need to fix relationships, we've got to learn to try to understand one another better. We've got to be slow to anger and quick to listen. We've got to be humble in our dealings. We've got to be respectful in our interactions. And at the same time, if you feel that you're always being criticized, hear what I'm saying right now. Look up at me. Everybody look up at me. If you feel that you're always being criticized, perhaps you should look at your life and your decisions and you try to understand if this is occurring for a reason. What I'm saying is, you are not a person whom everyone is against. You are not a person whom everyone criticizes just because that's the way I am. If everybody seems to be criticizing you, it's probably time to take a look and say, well, maybe I'm the one that needs changed and not them. Is that a fair statement? All right. Because I'm going to tell you something. There are types of judgment that are appropriate. I'm thankful for the legal court system, aren't you? You're afraid to answer. I'm thankful for the legal court system. We need it. I'm thankful for that. There are other areas. Censoring of erroneous beliefs. If someone is hypocritical, truly hypocritical, they need to be changed. They need to be told about that. And what about correction of defiant and inappropriate behavior? Absolutely. Every parent here says absolutely. And everyone who's going to be a parent someday, you'll say absolutely too. Here's the last place that it's, not the last place, but here's one more that I thought of. In self-assessment. It's appropriate to be critical of ourselves about need for change. In an area for me, all the time, seems like cyclical. For me, it's about weight loss. I'm like, I know I'm unhealthy right now. I was told 2 weeks ago, I was criticized 2 weeks ago by a friend that I work with. I was told how terrible I eat. I don't understand it. What is wrong on corn dog day at Sonic eating 6 corn dogs for breakfast? Somebody tell me. I was a victim in that conversation. And then to chase it by going over and getting a $4 pizza at Walmart is just ridiculous that she would gripe at me about that. I know. What is wrong with eating cottage cheese with brown gravy on it, I ask you? You are judging me. It's delicious. Becca, it's delicious. Miss Betty's with me. And Mr. Stan, see? Cottage cheese goes with everything but tomatoes. But it caused me to self-analyze. That's a true conversation that I had. They told me how terrible my diet was. I was like on a 90% carb diet. Yeah. There you go. It's confession time all around. People are coming from all over the auditorium, man. Self-analysis, that's important. We need to be asking ourselves, is what I am doing and what I am saying appropriate? Do I need to fix this? But when we're talking about judgment, a judgment-free life is impossible. I don't care what anybody says. I don't want to go to that church that's full of people who are just judging me all the time when I walk in the door. I'm telling you something. You can't go anywhere. It's not just church. You can't go anywhere without being judged. You ever walk in Walmart? I'm pretty sure everybody here has been in Walmart at one point or another in their life, Rick. And I'm telling you, if you go in Walmart in pajama pants and fuzzy slippers, I'm going to judge you. I'm sorry if that's the attire you decided to use, but I'm going to judge you. Because in my opinion, house slippers are meant for the house. I'd rather you go in barefoot and see your nasty, dirty toes with green stuff hanging out of it than you walk in fuzzy slippers. But I digress. So anyway, Jesus teaches us here in Matthew 7 not to judge according to our personal standards. See, I can't change your life. If you choose to go to Walmart in fuzzy slippers and pajama pants, that's on you. And you should not care whether I like it or not. If you choose to sit next to me and chew on your fork the whole time you're sitting next to me and cause chills go up and down my spine, I can't change that in you. That's your choice. If you choose to lick a chalkboard at school because you like the taste of chalk, that's on you. I can't change that. I can think of all kinds of gross things that drive me crazy. Well, you're missing out. The best job at school was taking the erasers out to that thing that looks like a shoe shine thing and cleaning it off and beating them all over and walking in looking like Casper. Casper's a cartoon, Andy. It's back in the day. Anyway, here's the thing. We are not supposed to judge on our personal standards. That's the whole point. It doesn't matter what I think because it's not about me when we're talking about criticism. We don't judge on personal standards. We don't judge on worldly standards, but we're supposed to judge according to God's standards. And if you don't believe me, you should look at John chapter 7, verse 24, which says this: do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment. You go back to Matthew chapter 7, 4 and 5. Jesus calls those who judge according to their own personal standard hypocrites. And one commentator pointed out this: have you ever thought of how appropriate it is in Matthew chapter 7, verses 4 and 5, how appropriate it is that Jesus chose to use the terms plank and speck, talking about these wood things. How appropriate it is because of where he grew up. His stepdad was a carpenter. And don't you know that when he was doing his chores, probably without griping at all, because he was without sin. If you gripe about your chores at home, you're a sinner. No one laughed at that at all. That was funny. I'm going to chalk that up to say it again sometime. Anyway, how appropriate is that though? He's working with his stepdad, and he had to have known what that felt like to have that in the eye. Because he says there, he's talking about the speck in your friend's eye or your brother's eye, and you're not even concerned about the entire piece of wood that you've got in your eye. How appropriate. Let me tell you something. Here's the takeaway from all of this. Number one, do not judge hypocritically. And in order for you not to judge hypocritically, that means you have to let go of your self-righteousness. Amen? Number two, do not judge hastily. Do not judge presumptuously. Do not judge just without having the big picture. You know what I'm saying? Number three, believers should not judge unjustly or unfairly or unmercifully. And that's the big term there that I think is most appropriate for us. We are forgiven because of God's mercy. Shouldn't we be willing to forgive because of God's mercy in our life? Doesn't that make sense? And the fourth thing, and to me, I think probably the most important one, is that do not judge according to the wrong standard. We judge according to our standard. We're doing it wrong. Today, the invitation begins a series on healing our relationships. And I'm going to tell you, we need help. I'm using as a reference a book by Dale Carnegie. Maybe you've heard of it. How to Win Friends and Influence People. Written a long time ago. It's an old book. It's been around, but I was reading it and I was thinking about the principles that were in it, and I thought, these are biblical. The first one that came up was on criticism. And I don't think it's any coincidence. I think we're struggling, folks. I'm struggling. I need deliverance from my problem of criticism. And I'm guessing if I do, you do too. So, The question is going to be is how are you going to receive these things, these principles that we're given? Biblical principles, if you will. How are you going to receive them if you're not willing to first examine yourself? And so this morning, that's what I'm going to ask you to do as we stand together in this time of invitation. I'm going to ask you if you begin to examine yourself before you start pointing fingers at those you feel are criticizing you and that you are criticizing. That's very simply what we're going to think about this morning, this time of invitation.